You are still tuned in to your power station Energy 100, and this is Economic Chat. Let's talk business with Mr. Daniel Steinman. You can, of course, go to our previous talks. That is at economist.com.na and get up to date with week 91. Mr. Daniel Steinman, we are talking grey listing, and we've went through what is the FATF, and of course also the impact of it, that Namibia has been grey listed, and you said that it's not that big a deal that we get grey listed because we still have a chance to improve of course the quality of Namibia's standard. So what then happens if we get unlisted?
It's a very good question, Elsabe. How do you get off that stupid list? It sounds a bit banal the way that I put it, but there is no other way. Remember, just before our break, I said, if you comply with these lofty ideals of stopping hot money and stopping child trafficking or smuggling of people, slavery, basically modern day slavery, it makes the world a better place. So it's to everybody's advantage to eventually comply with that. What you have to keep in mind, we're asking ourselves, how do we get off the list? How do we get unlisted from the grey list? First of all, we are in an election year. So you can mark my words and put them in a time capsule, and next year when we talk again, we can open the time capsule and see how on the spot I was. I don't think grey listing is going to receive much attention in Namibia between now and November when we have our elections. After the elections, grey listing will suddenly become an issue again. I mean, it's a fait accompli. There's nothing we can do. We've been grey listed. We know that we will remain on that list for 2 years. This year, we've got more serious things on our agenda. For instance, the election. And there's a looming drought again. I can guarantee you, we are 10 times more concerned about the lack of water than being on somebody else's grey list. And also remember what I explained to you, is that there isn't really a blacklist. If you're on the grey list, you eventually comply, you get all the laws in place and all the regulations, and you have the capacity to ensure that your country is not a conduit for laundered money or hot money, and then you get off that list. But this will only be in 2026, and that is when the next review is due, and it will take a couple of months after that to sort of get the verdict. Are we staying there, or are we off the list? Have we made progress? Are there still any outstanding issues? What capacity do we have to actually, in terms of law enforcement, to actually prevent this? Because there are 3 legs. In the beginning, it was just money laundering, but money laundering covers drugs and arms as well, military stuff. And then later on, it was refined a little bit more. So money laundering was one thing, hot money from whatever source, criminal activity. Then the second leg is terrorist financing. They're very serious on terrorist financing. But you know as well as I do that one guy's freedom fighter is another government's terrorist. It's very easy to tell the whole world, no, Hamas is a terrorist organization. It's very difficult to sell that same idea to the people living in Gaza. This is 2 parts of the coin, and we need to be realistic about it and aware of it. And the third one is what they call proliferation financing. That means that where money is used to buy military equipment and arms and weapons, but not going into Katatura and buy an old derelict AK-47 for $200. We're talking about at industrial level, where you buy and sell arms sufficient or
From
in
China and
sufficient
Russia.
quantities so that you can cause a civil war in a
Yeah.
country, for instance, or that you can go to a war with another country. You know, it's okay to buy arms as long as you buy them from the Americans or from the Italians or the Germans and the French and the English. Everybody who makes war or is in the military apparatus. You know that the defense industry in the United States is the biggest single industry in the United States. So if you want to buy arms for making war, just go to the US and buy them there. Don't buy them in the open market, because then it is proliferation financing. You are dealing in arms outside the established channels. You know.
Yeah.
So can you see what I'm not knocking the idea. I'm fully supportive of it, but I'm very realistic. You know, a large part of it is whose interest are we serving?
Yeah.
And from my last remarks, you must certainly get the idea that it all depends on which side of the fence you're on. You know, and again, Russia is a good practical example. They really don't give anything, or they don't lose sleep over whether they are a member of the FATF or not, or whether they so-called blacklisted or on anybody's list. You know, and I mean, if you go to war, you can't manufacture all the arms yourself. You have to buy some of it. So the question begs, who are the Russians buying some of their warfare stuff from? You know. And those are the type of questions that I'm fairly certain the leading members of the FATF do not want asked, but it's this type of stuff that we in Africa must consider. We know that we greylisted. We know what we must do to get off that grey list. We know it's not going to happen overnight. We also know that it's not a priority this year. Our elections are a far bigger priority. But we have to be realistic. In Africa, we must prevent choosing sides. You know, we nobody's buddy. We must look after our own interests. And the enormous work ahead of us for the next 50 years, getting the African Union to work, is far more important, in my point of view, than complying with the G20 rules for clean trade, if you can call it that, because that's what it's all about. You know, to also tax avoidance. Yeah, it's to our benefit to ensure that we do not allow tax avoidance, or that we contain it as much as possible. But you can take my word for it. I guarantee you that as long as there are big companies, there will be people that paid to help them avoid tax as much as they can, you know. So again, it's a coin with two sides. We need to look at the practicalities, and the practicalities is not what we're going to do next year, this year. What are we going to do next year to fix those last few loopholes, to get off that list, to prevent that risk of possibly not being able to trade with some of our big trading partners.
And on that note, I don't think I can add any much more. So thank you so much, Mr. Daniel Steinman, for coming through, and of course teaching our learners about greylisting, and also probably informing them that Namibia has been greylisted as well. I mean, that news, because like you said in the beginning, is that we were busy mourning, and I think that is something that many of us didn't take note of while we were mourning the loss of our president. So this information also came to me as a surprise, because I myself didn't even know about that. So thank you so much for that, and of course to our listeners, we will be back with you next week again. So from me, Elsa Vinyani and Mr. Daniel Steinman, we say goodbye until next week.